On a libertarian perspective, she still has the right to exercise her freedom to try this out if it's something she wants to do. I do agree with that. However, you just can't intellectualize or politicize human gut reactions to situations. There is nothing in my bones that could agree with the statement that what she did was empowering for herself. Yeah, there's drones, duh. Like, what do you expect? It's 2024. It's about to be 2025. There should be drones. That makes perfect sense. Despite his controversial reputation, I do not want to see Donald Trump shot in the head. I find that disgusting, but I have to admit, I am a little bit of a hypocrite because when I heard about the successful killing of the CEO of United Healthcare, I don't want to say I was rejoicing, but I also wasn't mad about it either. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Pranzata Podcast. This is your host, Andrea Pranzatelli. This is episode number 139 on the Pranzata Podcast on YouTube. This is going to be a solo podcast where I bring up some current events, including the OnlyFans model Lily Phillips that became very politicized, where she had sex with 100 people on camera, the mysterious drones that are flying around mainly New Jersey, but other parts of the country, the murder of CEO Brian Thompson, and more. Before we get into it, if you are new to this channel and you like what you hear today, please don't forget to hit subscribe. It is my mission to be a full-time podcaster, and every single subscriber helps me get closer to reaching the goal of that mission. Okay, so before we get into the topics, if you are new to this channel, you can probably click forward if you don't want to hear this, but I want to give a little bit of an explanation to my regular listeners who have been waiting for a new episode to upload what happened. Long story short, I don't want to get too much into it. Basically, December was the month of hell for me. I got incredibly sick, which really put me back a few weeks. There's definitely been something going around in this part of the country. I live in Philadelphia, and I'm sure in other parts of the country as well, but especially over here in New Jersey and Philadelphia, etc. There's been some type of respiratory infection that's been going around, and long story short, I already suffer with chronic allergy issues that I've been trying to get to the root of. And I had a really bad flare-up with my allergy issues. And then on top of that, I got hit with this respiratory infection. Which I thought was the flu, by the way. I knew it wasn't COVID because I tested negative for COVID. So at first I was like, well, if this isn't COVID, this is so fucked up that it must be the flu. But it turns out that it's this respiratory infection that's been going around. But anyways, getting hit with that and the allergy flare-up combined, it just knocked me out. So this entire month has been rough for me, and I couldn't upload. And just in general, if I'm being completely honest with you, and maybe I'll save this for another time, the year 2024 for me has been really rough. It has been, I've had a pretty tumultuous life in general. I've had a lot of struggles in my life, but I feel like this year in particular was definitely a rough one for me. I did hit some milestones this year. Like I reached my first 1,000 subs on the YouTube channel, which is a major milestone, and some other things as well. I had lost some weight and burned off fat from, weight I had put on in a depression. So some good things this year. But for the most part, if I could sum up this year metaphysically for me, I could basically say that I'm trying to put it in words. The best way I could describe it is not literally, on a metaphysical level, I felt like I had been a prisoner suffering emotionally with all these hardships that were going on in my life. And this year, in 2024, I felt like my will and my spirit were so determined to work really hard and to break through these struggles and this suffering. And I felt like this year, I was like a prisoner who just saw the crack, like who just saw a glimpse of light, and I was ready to reach it. And it was like there was a demonic force grabbing my leg and pulling me back and saying, "You're not ready for the light." I know that sounds really creepy, but that's how I can describe how I'm feeling about this year. So long story short, it's been a rough year for me, and particularly a rough month of December, but I'm still feeling hopeful, and I'm back, and I'm going to keep coming back here as soon as I can. And I'm going to keep working and striving to get past those struggles and continue to reach towards that light. And really, that might be a metaphor for life in general. I don't think there's really such thing as a human life without struggle, but you know what I mean? Just some big struggles that I had been trying to overcome. I felt like I was finally seeing the end of, but not yet, but soon enough. But okay, so let's get right into the content that I discussed in the beginning that I'm going to be covering today. So first and foremost, I want to cover for those who don't know what this is. So OnlyFans, and for some of my older listeners, because I know when I look at the analytics, I know I have some listeners in their 40s, 50s, 60s. So some people might not know what this is. But OnlyFans is a website. It's basically a social media website that, by the way, it wasn't originally designed just for pornographic content. It was actually designed for anybody to put content on there. You know, you could put piano videos up there technically, but for whatever reason, especially during the pandemic in particular, the website took on a reputation of being a sexually pornographic website. And keep in mind that it is a social media website. So women, you know, everyday women, I could do it, you could do it if you're a woman or a male, actually, whoever's listening could do it, can post nude photos or videos of themselves or sexually explicit photos or videos of themselves and can make money like a porn star, basically doing it privately instead of working for some porn video production company. So that's what OnlyFans is for some of my boomer listeners, no offense, but I know you're there and I know you're wondering. So there is this OnlyFans model named Lily Phillips, who is a young woman, I believe. I'm paraphrasing here, but I believe she's about 23 or 24 years old, maybe even 22. But she's a young, beautiful woman. And she happens to be an OnlyFans model, a very successful OnlyFans model on the platform. And she recently held an event that I'm assuming she broadcasted on her OnlyFans page, where she had sex with 100 men in a row in one day. And furthermore, she plans to go even harder on this, and she wants to plan an event where she's going to have sex with 1,000 men in one day. Now, this, for obvious reasons, became a viral news article. And for whatever reason, this became incredibly politicized as well. So, you know, different political current event commentators on the left and the right ended up covering this. And I guess I'm covering this as well. And I would consider myself more of a centrist. But I did want to put my 2 cents in this and how I feel about the political polarization of this event that Lily Phillips put on her OnlyFans page. Furthermore, before I give my personal opinion, I should note, and probably the most notable thing about this that became viral, is that there was video footage of her talking about the event. And in the video footage, she was being interviewed, and the interviewer asked her to describe what it felt like to have sex with 100 men in one day, or 100 men in a row, essentially. And while she was excited about this event that she put on, she started crying on camera. It was obvious that she was suffering a lot in the response that she gave and the genuine tears that flowed out of her when she was asked that question. By the way, side note, not applicable to this story, I'm going to be trained soon on how to show clips of these actual events so you guys don't have to look later. Like, so for example, I could in time be able to actually show you the clip of her crying. I have an appointment next week to be trained on how to do that. So my apologies that I can't insert that right now. I don't know how to, but I recommend you either pause the video and look it up and come back, or when the video is over, look it up on your own. Okay, but anyways, the fact that she was crying on camera when she was asked this question, for obvious reasons, became politicized because the conservative view of sex is that sexual activity should be reserved for a loving union in a marriage. And typically the liberal view of sex is that anybody should be free to have sex with whoever they want within or outside of a marriage. And I feel like my opinions on this lie somewhere in between this. So first, I want to give my criticisms of how I think the left responded to this versus how the right responded to this. I'm actually going to begin with the right. So there was a lot of right-wing current event commentators that had a pretty nasty response to her crying on camera. The one that pops to my mind would be Matt Walsh. And now I actually don't mind Matt Walsh. There's a lot of his content that I really liked. I actually really liked his movie, Am I Racist? And there's other things that I liked. But I have to say, I did think that his response to this with Lily Phillips was a little bit insensitive. And a lot of conservative political commentators in general, I would say, had a pretty similar reaction to this, that they were kind of like, boo-hoo, you for crying, you did this to yourself, you deserve this, etc. That type of reaction, which in my opinion was a little bit insensitive, because I think when you see a human being crying, I mean, okay, I get it. She did put herself up to this, but I do think there's a bigger picture to take in with this. First of all, she's 22, 23 years old. So I don't think someone that age really necessarily has enough mental development to make the best decisions for themselves. And I can only imagine, like, you know, somebody like a Matt Walsh or whoever I'm criticizing right now, if the tides had turned and they happened to be born in a more liberal family, if they were the same exact human being, but they happened to be born in a liberal family and they happened to be 22, 23 years old. If we're talking Matt Walsh in particular, obviously he wouldn't be as a male, he wouldn't be the one hosting an event where he's having sex with 100 women in a row. For some reason, that wouldn't slap as well as a woman doing it. But he might be a guy applying to do it, or he might be a guy subscribing to the channel to watch it, or, you know, any female political commentators, if they happened to be born into a liberal family and they were 22, 23 years old, and they were born in today's society where everything is very sexual based and TikTok dances and whatnot. You really never, I have a hard time just judging people so harshly like that without considering these things. And not only that, furthermore, not considering that her mother, this woman, Lily Phillips, her own mother was taking control of the finances with this event, which means her mother is supporting this. Her mother is actively supporting her own daughter having sex with 100 men in a row and planning another event where she's going to have sex with 1,000 men in a row. And by the way, I don't know the exact logistics of it, but I'm assuming the people who she's having sex with are men subscribed to her OnlyFans who tried out or applied to be a part of this. And I'm sure they paid a lot of money to do this. And furthermore, I'm sure she's making a killing selling the actual content of her having sex with 100 men. You know, for obvious reasons, she's going to make a lot of money doing this. But anyways, without getting too sidetracked, just the fact that I can't look at this situation other than this is a suffering human being. She's crying on camera. And I'm not going to take that stance that she did this to herself. She's obviously a lost soul. You know what I mean? And I think that moment on camera where she was crying revealed her true feelings in this situation. Believe it or not, my favorite take on this from the conservative, media landscape was Candace Owens. She essentially has the same exact perspective that I'm sharing now. And I watched her video and I completely agree with it, which really surprised me actually, because I feel like Candace Owens can be someone that's very sensationalist. In the past, she kind of gave me the impression that she wasn't a true conservative. She was kind of just being phony to get clicks and being very aggressive just to get views. But I was really surprised to hear her take on this, how compassionate she was towards Lily Phillips. And she kind of basically said the same thing that I'm saying now. And not only that, but she actually made a point to say that she doesn't want to lean in the direction of sensationalism anymore. She wants to actually be more authentic in her content. So to be honest, I judged her content in the past, but I have a lot of respect for her for owning up to that and wanting to change things and move forward. But anyways, that again, I really want to work up the skills to be able to include the actual footage of Candace Owens talking. But she basically said the same thing I'm saying. She said she doesn't, as a conservative woman, she doesn't agree with the decisions of Lily Phillips, but she's not going to shame her or wish anything bad on her. And she actually feels really badly for her. So that's my criticism of the right's take on this. I would say on the left, there wasn't really across the board as much of a consensus on their views on this. And I think in general, there was just less coverage on the left because, sexually scandalous material is definitely something more interesting for people on the right. But from some of the coverage I did see on the left about this, some people were arguing that this is her having sex with 100 or 1,000 men is an empowering thing for her, and she's making money, and sort of a feminist view of she's taking her money in her own hands and she's free to do whatever she wants, etc., and how it's empowering for her. So my criticism of this is that while I do agree with it on a libertarian perspective that anybody should be able to do whatever they want despite the despite the spiritual consequences in this case is what I mean. Obviously, you can't do whatever you want despite the consequences of like murdering people, etc. But I'm just saying, even if on a spiritual level this is painful to her, she still, on a libertarian perspective, she still has the right to exercise her freedom to try this out if it's something she wants to do. I do agree with that. However, I totally disagree with that this is something empowering to her. I feel like when it comes down to it, we can make the argument that, of course, women have the freedom to have sex with as many men they want, and they do have the freedom to have sex with as many men they want. But I think a lot of these women are lying to themselves and are kidding themselves when they think that it's actually empowering themselves. Again, I can't speak for every woman out there. I'm sure there's some women out there who genuinely enjoy sleeping around, and hey, all the power to them. But I think in this particular case with Lily Phillips, like we were talking about before, when she was interviewed about how she felt about sleeping with 100 men in a row, her visceral reaction, like her immediate response, was pain and suffering. And you got a glimpse of that in the camera. And I don't really care what anybody says. People like to get so intellectual about things, but you can't politicize or intellectualize your gut feelings. You can't politicize your gut reaction to things, I guess you actually can intellectualize a gut reaction to something like that, because you could say, well, because of religion, we have it so ingrained in our system that we have to be sexually moral. So you could actually intellectualize it, but I don't know, like a response that quick to a question like that, it doesn't seem like there was much of a thought process there. It just seemed like that's what having sex with 100 men felt like to her. She did not feel empowered by that. And little short side story that I can, give from my own life. I recently had my own little sexcapade, I guess we could say, on Tinder. And first of all, I want to disclaim that I actually didn't know Tinder was a sex app. Like, I didn't know that people went on Tinder primarily to hook up with people. I actually, a complete moron I am, I'm not very well versed in online dating. I'm 36 years old. I've never dated. I think in the past, I might have went on like 1 or 2 online dates on Match.com 10 years ago. But the whole online dating landscape as a 36-year-old woman is completely new to me. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't really know how it goes. You know what I mean? But long story short, I had been single for an entire year. I hadn't been sexually active this entire year. And I decided I was ready to start seeking a partner. I opened a Tinder profile because that's the name that I always hear about. It's one of the biggest names that you hear about. And I wrote very clearly in the bio that I was looking for a serious relationship. I happened to meet a guy on there that I was very attracted to. I think, without letting the story linger on too long, we had a couple dates, quite literally being 2 dates. And without really, I think I should have waited a few dates. And again, this is like a whole political thing in itself. Like, some people would argue like that's ridiculous, that's old school. But reflecting on my experience, I should have waited more than 2 dates to get sexually active with this person. And I should have had a straightforward conversation about what I was looking for before getting sexually active with this person. I assumed that he would read my bio and know what I was looking for, but it's still, responsibility is still on me that I did not ask him what he was looking for. I just, So after that experience, anybody listening, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, you know how this goes. A man will go to great lengths to try to please a woman. He will do tricks for her. He will juggle for her. And once he gets sex, if he's in a place where he wants to pursue a relationship, he will stick around. But if he's just in it for the sex, he will disappear. And I don't want to say he disappeared because I was actually the one who cut things off, but he basically totally changed his tone. Prior to that, he was very attentive and setting up dates and setting up the time, etc. And then after we had sex, he just kind of, the tone changed. He stopped texting me. Like I would text him and he'd respond, but he would stop texting me. He didn't reach out to plan another date. So afterwards I was like, oh fuck, I just got played basically. He's not a bad guy. He seems like a pretty nice guy. I don't want to like totally discredit him, but that's not even the point. The point of the story isn't, is this a good guy or a bad guy, or is what he did wrong? The point I'm trying to make is that as a woman, my emotional response to realizing that I had just slept with somebody who wasn't looking for a relationship, and I can tell you so many women who have been through the same exact experience tell me the same exact thing. It would be cool if I could just say, I haven't gotten laid for a year and I just got laid. Like it would be empowering and cool if I could say that and actually feel happy about it. But again, it's going back to that instinct. I think in theory, it should be cool for me to get laid, but it just didn't feel good. It felt, obviously it's not going to feel as bad as having sex with 100 men in a row. It's not that serious, but it just felt like, wow, what did I do that for? That was, if this person's listening, it wasn't a waste of time in the sense that it didn't feel good. Like everything felt good in the moment. But afterwards, it's the feeling you get as a woman is like, why did I do that? This is a waste of time. That didn't mean anything. Like it's just an empty feeling. And I'm willing to bet more men feel that way too than they're willing to admit. I feel like a lot of men sleep around or, want to sleep with a lot of women. And I feel like in general, they could tolerate it better than a woman can. But so many men I know who have slept around also end up saying the same thing. They're like, yeah, it's cool at first, but you reach a certain point where it just feels sort of empty. It feels like there's nothing there. So I do feel like men even get the same feeling. It's just women get that feeling instantly. And I feel like men get that feeling after many years of experience in it before they kind of feel like it's a waste of time. So I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling on this, but long story short, bringing it back to the Lily Phillips thing, as a woman, even as a woman who has liberal views and who has, like I said, libertarian views about sex, I think anybody should be able to do whatever the fuck they want. You just can't intellectualize or politicize human gut reactions to situations. There is nothing in my bones that could agree with the statement that what she did was empowering for herself. Maybe it was empowering in the fact that she got a lot of money. So if you want to say empowering in the sense that it gave her financial power, sure. But as far as how she feels as a person, as far as confidence empowerment, yeah, there's nothing in me that could look at that footage of her crying as a response to the question she was asked and say that what she did was empowering. Now, morals aside, leaving all the political stuff aside, I have so many questions about the actual event itself. Forget about the 100 men. I'm actually more curious about the 1,000 men event that she's planning. One, is she going to have these men wear condoms? Because the odds are, if she's going to have sex with 1,000 men, statistically speaking, she's going to get an STD. So do these men that apply for this, do they have to do like an STD test and send their test? Are they going to be wearing condoms? So I have a lot of questions about that. Secondly, how is there enough time in a day to have sex with 1,000 men? That doesn't even seem realistically possible. Like, is she going to eat? Is she going to shit? Like, if she has to take a shit, is she going to shit in the bed? Is she going to have time to eat anything? Is there anything that she could eat that would fill her up and not like give her stomach pains while she's having sex with all these people? Another question, does it count as having sex with 1,000 men if you didn't have like a focused sex section? There's no way she can have the time in one day to have a sexually attentive session and make all these different men orgasm in one day. That's not possible. So I feel like realistically, she would have to be gangbanged. So she would basically be penetrated by 1,000 men. Does that count as having sex with 1,000? I don't think she should advertise this event as I'm going to have sex with 1,000 men. I think she should advertise it as I'm going to be penetrated by 1,000 dicks. I think that's how it really is. But who are these men, by the way? That's my other, obviously I'm assuming it's her OnlyFans subscribers, probably men who are subscribed to her OnlyFans can apply to it. Who is she selecting? Like, is she selecting men that she's attracted to? Is she selecting a certain age range? I mean, there's a lot of questions I have about this. So, I wish her the best of luck, I guess. I feel really bad for her that she's actually going to go through with this. But also, side note, it is kind of impressive that if she could do it, but I don't think it's empowering whatsoever. I think if she felt pain from the 100 men, I guarantee you in 5 years, she's going to have a viral clip about how she regrets her decisions, if not in 5 years, if not sooner than that. Or she might end up just canceling the event altogether before it happens. But anyways, moving on to the next topic, the drones. So if I'm being entirely honest about the drones, like I said earlier in this podcast episode, I was very mentally checked out all of December because I was sick. So I actually didn't even know about the drones because I live in Philadelphia and I'm sure there have been some around here, but from my understanding, they're mainly New Jersey, which is funny because I grew up in New Jersey and I grew up in central Jersey. So some of the drones that you're hearing about, like over Metuchen, etc., those are actually parts of the country that I should be very familiar with because my entire family lives there. But I was so mentally checked out this month from being sick that I kind of didn't care about the drones. So if I'm being honest, I don't have a lot to say right now about the drones. I do have a podcast guest from New Jersey who really wants to come on my podcast and talk about the drones he's seen. So I'm going to get more into it then with him. And I'm sure his excitement about it will liven me up to this. But honestly, all I can say right now is that I don't have a lot of emotional attachment to the drones right now. I think part of it is because I think our society has been getting weirder and weirder each year that it doesn't really shock me. Like if you told me this 4 or 5 years ago, I would have been obsessed with this. I would have been like, are they aliens? What's going on? Are we in danger? But now I'm like, I don't know. Things have been getting so weird in our society and each year gets weirder and weirder that nothing surprises me. It's normal. I'm like, yeah, there's drones. Duh. Like, what do you expect? It's 2024. It's about to be 2025. There should be drones. That makes perfect sense. And any explanation that they finally figure out when they figure this out, none of it will surprise me. If you told me it's China, I would be like, yeah, that makes sense. If you told me that the government has the drones because they're trying to protect us from Putin launching a nuclear attack, I'd be like, yeah, I expect that. I expect there to be a nuclear attack. Like what of course there's going to be drones. What do you expect? Or if you told me these were aliens, I would be like, yeah, that's correct. That's right. Nothing shocks me. And I'm sure if they were actually aliens, then I would be like, what the fuck? But I also wouldn't be surprised at the same time. I will be waiting to see with the rest of the country what happens here, but I'm not necessarily enjoying the adventure the way some of the people are. I'm just kind of like, yeah, whatever it is not beyond my imagination at this point, and I'm fully surrendering and accepting any explanation to it at this point. But I will have a gentleman from New Jersey who wants to talk more about this, so stay tuned on my podcast if you want to hear about that. Okay, so moving on from that, because I don't have a lot to say about that right now, the next topic I want to talk about is the murder of the CEO of the health insurance company United Healthcare. And for those of you who don't know, Brian Thompson is the name of the CEO. For those of you who don't know, and I'm sure everybody knows at this point, but just in case, the CEO of the health insurance company United Healthcare was murdered by a young, very attractive man named Luigi Mangione, clearly Italian, obviously. And this, kind of like the Lily Phillips thing we were talking about in the beginning of this episode, has become a polarized, politicized issue that has been getting national and viral coverage from political commentators on both the left and the right. So again, this was another thing because I was sick all of December. I'm late to the game on this one, but because I missed out on an opportunity to leave my comments about this, I want to say what I have to say about this. From what I understand on the political spectrum, on the left, there is a lot of people almost cheering on what happened as a way to represent the fight against poor people being taken advantage of by the rich in the country. And then on the right, you have some people who surprisingly agree with that more than you would believe. But then you also have some other people who believe that violence should never be the answer and this should not be celebrated and there shouldn't be any tolerance of the death of somebody being celebrated, despite the reasons why there might be actual legitimate reasons why the country would feel the need to celebrate it. That regardless of that, there should not be any celebration of violence and death as a way to attain some leverage in this fight of the rich versus the poor. Again, I have a very centrist view on this where I kind of agree and disagree with both of these sides in certain ways and not in other ways. So I will give my take on this. I want to say that I'm a little bit of a hypocrite because when there was an assassination attempt of Donald Trump, if I'm being honest, I felt pretty disgusted by hearing some liberals actually they were not rejoicing because some of the liberals were actually taking this perspective of they wish the assassination had been successful, or some people were cracking jokes like, you only missed him by an inch, that sort of talk. I personally was pretty disgusted by that because despite his controversial reputation, I do not want to see Donald Trump shot in the head. I have compassion for him as a human being on a human being level, and I find that disgusting. But I have to admit, I am a little bit of a hypocrite because when I heard about the successful killing of the CEO of United Healthcare, I don't want to say I was rejoicing, but I also wasn't mad about it either. I'm just being completely honest of my own hypocrisy in this situation. And when I really reflect on that, why I wasn't quite as upset about it as I would have been if Donald Trump was assassinated, I think it might have something to do with the fact that I don't know Brian Thompson. I never even heard his name. I had to go look at my notebook to even remember his name. I don't have any personal association with him. I don't know about his life. I don't know about his family. I don't know anything about him. So I'm sure if I knew about him on a more personal level and I heard his family talking about it and I saw pictures of his kids, probably I would have a little more compassion. But for some reason, mentally, I'm not seeing him as a person. I'm just seeing it as the CEO of United Healthcare. And I think a lot of the country is doing that. So I think at the heart of it, I don't agree. I agree with the conservatives that violence is not the answer. I don't think it should come down to violence to make a point. But at the same time, I understand why the left feels this way, because I can tell you from my experience, I think as a centrist, my liberal side definitely comes out when it comes to how the poor does get taken advantage of by corporations, etc. So for example, CEO of United Healthcare aside, as somebody myself who struggled immensely with financial issues, and I think a lot of times conservatives have this view that like pull yourself by the bootstraps type of perspective, which I actually sometimes have myself too. I do feel like at the end of the day, everybody needs to take responsibility for themselves. But there are genuine instances where life catastrophe happens to people, and it's really hard for them to put their boots on and climb out of a devastating situation. So, for example, hypothetical situation. Let's say there's a person out there who they had a serious life-threatening disease, and they were a young person in college, but they got cancer, right? They had to take time off from college. They took out student loans, and the student loan companies would not forgive the debt because that's how student loan companies are. It's really hard to get them to forgive debt, even in a life crisis. It's extremely difficult to file a bankruptcy on student loan debt. And let's say this person, so they lost money on their student loans. And then furthermore, they didn't have a good health insurance company, and they were in thousands of dollars, like $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in debt from their medical bills and their cancer treatments. Now, let's say this person recovers, right? And they're a hardworking person, that they can't help that they got cancer, right? And now that they're recovered and they're physically well, they do want to put their boots on and get back to work and do what they can. Now, you do have these corporate companies that will take advantage of people in this situation. Like, let's say that person, their credit score got lowered. If they wanted to buy a laptop and they don't have enough cash, but they need a laptop for work, they have things out there like leasing, etc., where they'll lease a laptop to people like that, but they will throw all these like hidden, when you sign a contract agreement and there's all these like, you think you're signing something and then it's 50 fucking pages long. So you don't see in the fine print that it's like, by the way, after the 5th payment, you're going to be paying double the price than you actually paid. And you don't see that till later. I've struggled with financial situations myself in life. So I've been victim of situations like this. Actually, I was just talking about this with a friend. There's a really funny South Park episode pretty much about this, where I think it has to do with iTunes, and these people are signing up to be a member of iTunes and pay for the monthly subscription for iTunes. And then there's this like giant contract that they have to sign, and no one pays attention to it. They just sign it. And then they end up, and keep in mind, this is a South Park episode, they end up being part of a human centipede experiment, which was based off of the movie called Human Centipede. And if you don't know the movie, they basically have to like tie their assholes together, or like it's like a group of people where they sew the asshole to the mouth and the asshole to the mouth, and it's supposed to be a human centipede. It's really disgusting, like the way I'm describing it, but it was really funny in the South Park episode because it was just proving a point that when you sign contracts, you get yourself in some serious shit. Like you end up like signing up for this human centipede project. But anyways, without getting too sidetracked with that, that's what sometimes these companies will do with poor people. They know these people are desperate and they don't have the money to buy the things they need. Like this day and age, you need a laptop to survive, right? So they will take advantage of somebody like that, and they will put in the fine print, like, by the way, you're going to end up paying 3 times the amount for this laptop. So again, I do understand the perspective that you shouldn't leech off of the government all the time and you have to like try your best to work. But then there are situations like this where greedy companies will take advantage of these people. I mean, I guess I do kind of understand maybe slapping on an extra fee to somebody with a low credit score, because it's like, hey, I need to slap on this extra fee to guarantee that you're actually going to pay, because if you end up faulting on the payment, then I get nothing out of this, and et cetera. I get that. But I don't know, something like a lease, I don't think you need to be charging people in serious debt, trying their best to crawl out of their debt. You don't need to charge them like 2 or 3 times the amount. I do feel like there are things like this in life. So without getting too sidetracked, tying this back to the CEO of the United Healthcare company, so many people have been fucked over by healthcare companies. And I am somebody who can speak to that from my experience. I just went through it myself, actually, recently. The past 6 months, I have been going through some type of chronic health condition that I couldn't get a diagnosis for. And I had been going back and forth to all these different doctor's appointments, trying to get a proper diagnosis for my health condition, only to send me to the next specialist, to send me to the next specialist. The whole health system is really fucked up right now. And unless you're rich and you can afford the best doctors, they are giving us such shit doctors. And by the way, I have had 1 or 2 pretty good doctors, but they are far and few in between. If you're not if you can't afford the golden health insurance plan and you can only afford the base like silver plan or whatever, you're getting stuck with shit doctors. And actually, even people who do get the gold plan, they also complain about their doctors as well. You know, these days, if you want to get a good doctor, you need to go to like New York City, Manhattan, and throw down a lot of money. And sometimes these people aren't even covered by insurance. But for example, when I first was explaining my symptoms to some of these doctors that I was going to, the first doctor I went to that I was explaining my symptoms, and without being gross, one of my symptoms was that I was spitting a lot, and which later on I found out was a histamine response. Like your body produces a lot of mucus when you're allergic to something. But I told the guy I was spitting a lot, and he picks up his phone, he Googles my symptoms, or probably WebMDs my symptoms. He looks up at me and he goes, "Have you come in contact with a rabid raccoon?" And I guess because like hypersalivation, like the spitting, he must have thought hypersalivation. What the fuck, dude? The reason I come to the doctor is so I'm not a neurotic mess thinking I have rabies. Like, clearly I did not have fucking, like I was not foaming at the mouth. I was like totally coherent. And so that's what I mean. Like you pay a lot, like, and the copay, right? My copay was $75. I paid $75 just for a man to look at his phone and tell me he thinks I have rabies. And so you go from that doctor, then they send you to another specialist, then they send you to another specialist, and you go on this whole carousel of doctors for 6 months that has been going for me. I was in the ER multiple times, like with these like chronic allergy symptoms that I was having. And then I had been misdiagnosed multiple times. Like I had one doctor tell me they thought I had acid reflux. I guess that's like they thought was the spitting. Went on a full-on like acid reflux medication treatment, which was very expensive, and went on a full-on diet only to find out it wasn't working. It was a misdiagnosis, etc. And by the way, I don't even blame all these doctors necessarily, because I think some of these doctors that are doing a shitty job, I think they're being slammed with so many clients in one day that they're probably spiritually and emotionally exhausted themselves, and they don't have the energy to really give everything they can to each one of their clients. And I understand that. Like, it's not entirely their fault. The system is fucked up, but it's fucked up for everybody, except probably the CEO. The CEO is the guy at the top who's probably benefiting from all of this. And the lower you get down the totem pole, there's like a little more evil in each one. Like, you know, the doctors are collecting a lot of money for this. And by the way, that's a whole philosophical debate in itself that I actually had with one of my friends on a previous episode. We were talking about the dating app where, I don't remember the name of the dating app now, but it's oh God, what is it called? Someone in the comment section, if you know what I'm talking about, write the title of it. But there's a dating app where there was a whole Netflix documentary about it, where people, they go to this dating app to have extramarital affairs. And the whole dating app is designed for people who want to have married affairs. So everybody on there is married and looking for an affair, basically. So we had a debate on the podcast episode where we were talking about, would you be immoral if you were working as an employee of that website? Because you're basically helping aid in an immoral act that you don't agree with. And it was really hard to really answer that question. Is it immoral to work for a job that participates in evil? And I don't know, obviously it's highly debatable if cheating in a marriage is evil. That's obviously complex in itself, but just in terms of simplifying the conversation, let's just say it's evil. That's not an easy question to answer, because that can leak out to so many different things. Like, for example, is it evil to work at Quick Check and sell cigarettes to people? You know these cigarettes are killing people. You know that these cigarette companies are targeting to advertise to people knowing that it's could potentially, very likely kill them, or at least give them health problems. Are you evil for being an employee of Quick Check or Wawa or whatever part of the country you're from? I know in New Jersey they do Quick Check. Quick Stop for us Philly residents. So it's not that easy to answer that question. Are these doctors participating in evil by being part of this evil system? Is the desk lady working for CEO? Is the desk lady working for a medical facility participating in evil. You know what I mean? Like, where does it stop? But I think most people agree that the top of the totem pole here, the CEO, is probably participating in the most evil because that CEO is gaining the most from this corrupt system. And furthermore, he actually benefits from turning down certain clients that don't have a probability of surviving and taking on clients that have an easier chance of surviving. So this is stuff that people listening can look up later about certain insurance companies will actually reject people with prior conditions. I can't remember what the medical term is. Pre-existing conditions. By the way, pet insurance companies do the same exact thing. So as a pet owner, I own 2 cats. When I try to get cat insurance, I don't even bother anymore because they will ask if your cat has pre-existing conditions. And if they do, and one of my cats does, they won't accept him on the insurance plan because they're like, oh, well, then if he has an issue, we can't cover that. That's ridiculous. But they do that with human beings as well. And that's some of the criticisms against this CEO of United Healthcare, is that he was benefiting financially from some of this. Now, I'm not an expert on healthcare companies and how the healthcare system works, but all I can say is, as somebody who has been fucked over and who has gotten in mountains of debt from my own medical issues over the years, something's fucked up and something is not working. And people are exhausted like me trying to chase down a diagnosis and not getting anywhere with it. And most of the times, a lot of clients actually end up diagnosing themselves and being correct. They end up looking up things on ChatGPT. I do this all the time, and looking at WebMD and finding a similar pattern and having to self-advocate to these doctors like, hey, I've been having these symptoms. Please don't push this aside. This is serious. And the only way some of these people, and myself included, have been able to get help is to fight for their own health, because some of these doctors are just so exhausted seeing all these different clients that they don't have the energy to be that attentive to anybody, really. So you have to almost fight and advocate for your own health. The whole thing's a mess. It's exhausting. The appointments are expensive. The medication is expensive. And again, a lot of the times people just go on this massive rigmarole to get healthy, only to get unhealthy, because they end up so mentally stressed out by the whole process that they kind of set their health back as a result of that. So I don't know. Circling back to why I even had this topic on, I was trying to give my centrist view on this. Again, to reiterate what I said before, I don't condone violence as an answer. And I am a bit of a hypocrite that I was very critical of people wanting Donald Trump assassinated. And I was really angry about that perspective, but yet I'm far more understanding of this perspective. Is kind of interesting. And I'll admit that I'm being a little bit of a hypocrite there, but I can only just explain it honestly, how I'm feeling. Obviously, something needs to change in our healthcare system. What needs to change and how it needs to change is beyond my expertise. I have no idea, but I do think, if anything, healthcare should be something that everybody has a right and an access to in some form or another. Like, I understand certain specialists are going to be more expensive than the others. I get that. But at the very least, I think things could be improved for everybody. You know, people shouldn't have to fight so hard to get a diagnosis, you know. I don't think a poor person who ends up getting cancer unexpectedly and did nothing wrong, you know, obviously there are some people who smoked and got cancer, and maybe there is an argument that those people should have some financial accountability for that, for making decisions that would financially harm them. But let's say you have a totally, you know, a hardworking person who ate right and exercised, and they, you know, they happen to live in a poor community where they couldn't control the air pollution, and they ended up getting cancer. And now this person who was already struggling to make it is slapped on with years of medical debt that they might have to file bankruptcy for, which then spirals into a whole nother thing because then they can't get housing because they have a bankruptcy record, etc. Obviously, something's wrong, something's a mess, and something needs to be improved. And as somebody who has shown this year on this channel that I do have some more conservative leaning views these days, you definitely can't change my heart when it comes to healthcare and people being healthy. My liberal side definitely comes out and cannot change in regards to that. That's just, there's certain things I can see a conservative view on, like we were talking in the beginning of this podcast. I definitely see a usefulness for being sexually conservative, etc. But when it comes to healthcare, that's something where I think as people, we need to be taking care of our neighbors. And actually, it's funny. I find it, I don't want to assume that this is a general conservative view that the way things are going with healthcare is fine, because I don't know if conservatives all think that. I'm sure that many conservatives actually agree that we need to change something about our healthcare system. But something funny that I find like a little bit of a contradiction when it comes to conservative politics is that a lot of conservatives are religious. So from a religious perspective, if you were, for example, honoring Jesus Christ, you would want to take care of your neighbor. So with that being said, it would make sense from a conservative Christian perspective that you would want a better healthcare system and you would want easier access to healthcare and affordable access to healthcare. And on the contrary, it's kind of funny, when I give the same criticism to liberals, they would almost it's interesting that they hate religion so much because if they want free healthcare, you would almost think that they would be more down with Jesus, right? I understand the criticisms of the left on religion with other things like, there's like the abortion issues, etc. But I think at the very least, if you're a liberal, you should be cool with Jesus, right? Like if you want free healthcare. But anyways, whatever. That's a total side tangent. That could be a whole nother podcast episode in itself. But that's it, guys. I was going to have a couple more topics, but I'm going to save them for the next time. I am not sick anymore. I'm still suffering with the allergy issues, but I don't have that respiratory illness anymore. So we should be able to be back on track for the rest of the new year, actually, unless another thing happens. But I will be here as often as I possibly could. Again, this is the Pranzata Podcast, episode 139. If you are new to this channel, again, please don't forget to hit subscribe. It is my mission to be a full-time podcaster, and every subscriber helps me more than you could possibly know reach the goal of that mission to be able to financially support myself from this podcast. Also, if you like what you heard and there's a particular topic that you want me to bring up on the next solo podcast episode, if you want to hear my opinion on anything else, let me know. Drop in the comment section what you would like me to talk about in the next podcast episode. And that's it. Have a good day, guys. Bye.